Ήταν καλοκαίρι. Ήμουν τόσο ευτυχισμένη.
Σκέφτομαι συνέχεια. Μόνο είσαι δικιά μου. Μόνο δικιά μου.
Το ίδιο και εκείνος.
Κανείς δεν θα σε αγαπήσει όπως εγώ. Κανείς.
Δεν έπαιρνε τα μάτια του από πάνω μου. Κάναμε τα πάντα μαζί.
Δεν αντέχω να είσαι λεπτό μακριά μου. Μη μ' αφήσεις. Ποτέ.
Δεν με άφηνε λεπτό μόνη.
Δεν καταλαβαίνω γιατί θες να πας μόνη σου. Νομίζω ότι πας. Και ποιες είναι αυτές οι φίλες σου, δεν τις ξέρω. Λες ψέματα.
Δεν μπορούσα να δω κανέναν εκτός από αυτόν. Να μιλήσω σε κανέναν.
Ωραία, ποιος είναι? Θέλω να μας χωρίσουν, δεν το βλέπεις. Τι σκατά έχεις μες στο κεφάλι σου.
Καλά. Κάθε που με πλησίαζε η καρδιά μου πήγαινε να σπάσει.
Μαριά, άνοιξε.
Άνοιξε μου, σε παρακαλώ. Σου είπα συγγνώμη.
Σ' αγαπάω.
Άνοιξε, Μαριά!
Άνοιξε.
Έλα! Άνοιξε!
Μαριά, άνοιξε μου.
Έκανα τα πάντα. Ή έτσι νόμιζα.
Για πες το πάλι.
Θέλω να χωρίσω.
Θα με αφήσει.
Λέγε, πες το πάλι, πες το.
Θέλω να σε αφήσω. Θέλω να σε αφήσω.
Θα σε αφήσω να φύγεις ποτέ. Ποτέ ακούς! Καταλαβαίνεις. Μην κλαις, εντάξει. Σκάσε, μην κλαις, σκάσε. Σκάσε! Μην κλαις, σκάσε. Έλα εδώ, έλα εδώ! Έλα εδώ, θες να φύγεις, Κάτσε, δεν σ' ακούει κανένας τι φωνάζεις.
Τώρα πια δεν έχει σημασία. Σημασία έχει τι θα κάνεις εσύ που ακόμα μπορείς.
Σαν κλαίνε τα πουλιά, μη μου μιλάς για αγάπη στην έρμια κρογιαλιά. Κάτι κρυφό το κύμα λέει στη σιγαλιά, το παίρνουν μες στο δίλη και κλαίνε τα πουλιά. Ερήμη θα απομείνει για πάντα η εξοχή.
Hi everybody, I'm Nadia Kostiani, journalist, digital content creator and editor-in-chief at GenIGR, proud supporter of PLG Disrupt. What we just watched was the latest short film from Lacta, a chocolate brand that for years has been telling love stories in the form of branded entertainment. This time though, the narrative was not what we've been accustomed to expect from a brand. And that's why a rise in domestic violence cases in 2021 in Greece has stunned the nation, especially after 14 brutal femicides have been reported in media since the beginning of the year, creating a grim body count that keeps rising every other month. Many of these murders have been falsely attributed to extreme passion or have been called love crimes. In the wake of these events, Lacta chose to produce a short film that shows what a love story is not. The film was created by Ogilvy Greece and released ahead of International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It's raw, it's grim, it's disturbing, it's hard to watch, exactly like the reality the majority of women around the world are facing every single day, both in their personal and working lives. That's why it's also a powerful film with, I hope, lasting impact, because it draws attention to the most basic of issues that we're facing right now, that of women's safety, and prompts the viewer to ask, what can be done? What should be done? Today we're here to target this question into a more focused group. What can CEOs do and other companies to address gender-based violence? Today we're here to target this question into a more focused group. What can CEOs and other company executives do to address gender-based violence? The Me Too movement, which PLG Disrupt supports actively, has fundamentally altered how society is dealing with sexual harassment and abuse at the workplace. But other forms of gender-based violence, such as domestic abuse, often affect victims in the workplace, making gender-based violence a complex issue for companies. Among their many negative effects, domestic violence and sexual harassment interfere with women's full and equal participation in the workforce. They impair employees' physical and mental health and well-being, leading to stress, anxiety, loss of self-esteem, motivation, and even job loss. It contributes to the gender pay gap and affects women's opportunities for advancement and career progression. Now, let's talk some numbers, shall we? Gender-based violence affects 1 in 3 women globally. Of its many forms, including physical, sexual, psychological, and economic, physical and sexual violence carried out by intimate partners or domestic violence is the most widespread. More than 640 million women aged 15 and older have been subjected to intimate partner violence. Calls to helplines have increased 5-fold in some countries, as rates of reported intimate partner violence increase because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Restricted movement, social isolation, and economic insecurity are increasing women's vulnerability to violence in the home around the world. Fewer than 40% of women who experience violence seek help of any sort. In the majority of countries with available data of this issue, among women who do seek help, most look to family and friends. Fewer than 40% of women who experience violence seek help of any sort. In the majority of countries with available data on this issue, among women who do seek help, most look to family and friends, and very few look to formal institutions such as police and health services. As a matter of fact, fewer than 10% of those seeking help appeal to the police. Now, the technology industry, as you may know, has some of the highest rates of sexual assault, with 37% of women in the US alone affected. Cases of gender-based violence frequently occur at technology conferences in particular. According to an Ensono study of 18 major technology conferences in the US and the UK over a 3-year period, 38% of female attendees have experienced sexual harassment. So, how can businesses take the lead in combating gender-based violence? Well, the answers are complex and there are no quick fixes. The choices employers make can have a tangible impact, shaping a working world and by extension a wider society where more people can live free from violence and harassment, and where they can prosper and thrive regardless of gender. One of the main goals of today's panels is to address these matters and discuss the ways that companies can become, or are already becoming, part of the solution. One of the main goals of today's panels is to address these matters and discuss the ways that companies can become, or are already becoming, part of the solution. In the panel Women in Tech, the challenges behind the scenes, I'll discuss with 4 successful female leaders working in fast-paced established organizations the challenges and the opportunities that tech space hides in plain sight for women, but also how companies like Vodafone and Beat evangelize equality and diversity internally from the initial recruitment stages. I think it's going to be a great chat with some really cool women, and I hope to see you all there. Do you hear me? Does everyone hear me? Great.
We do. Yeah, we hear you.
Hello. So okay, let me introduce you to our viewers. So we have, and just let me excuse myself if I do any spelling mistakes. Well, okay, we have Adana Sommer Welch Charles, right? Great. Head of Operational Convergence at Vodafone. We have Lislot Watsters, Director of Talent at Beat. Kimberly Bloomstone, VP of Product, Core Platform and Data Marketplace at LiveRamp. And Katerina Gorogianni, People Engagement Manager at Vodafone. So without further ado, would you like to tell us make an introduction for yourselves? Can you give us a compact narrative of your career path up to this point? Kimberly, shall we start with you?
Sure, why not? Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly, as Naya said. I currently am the VP of Product at a company called LiveRamp, which is primarily focused in the advertising ad tech space. Certainly, I did not realize early in my career that I would end up working in tech. Like many product managers, I sort of fell into it. Starting my career really young at the age of 16, working in so many different places, from retailers to grocery stores to even laundromats. And eventually in college, I worked for a managed services company that also had a technology sister company, and quickly learned product management and just fell in love. And from there, I've worked in a number of different technology industries, but always in tech, and always in a product area that was in the middle of disruption. So it's been a lot of fun and a great journey. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Lislot?
Hey, hello everybody. My name is Lisa Lott. Very nice to meet you, and also very pleased to be here and to exchange some thoughts about women in tech, but also to learn from you, of course. I also, just like Kimberly, did not choose for a company in tech. I was a consultant in talent management and worked across industry. And it was only when I moved to London that I landed a job in tech. And now currently I'm the director of talent at Beat. For those of you who don't know Beat, Beat is a Greek company in the ride-hailing space and one of the fastest growing ride-hailing apps in Latin America, where we have most of our employees as well. So very diverse crowd there. Throughout my career, I really focused on talent attraction and talent retention. And my first job was actually in Sri Lanka, where my role was to support women in becoming more independent. Really, really interesting experience that really helped me as well to shape my career. I had the chance to live in 3 different continents across a wide array of roles and countries. And for me, the focus has always been creating the right environment for people to grow and to flourish. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Adana, let's hear about you.
So hi, everyone. I'm Adana Welch, and really delighted to be part of this community today. So traditionally, I wouldn't say that I wanted to work in tech. I think tech chose me. I started off, wanted to be a neurosurgeon. One of the people that I aspired or inspired me was a lady called Alexia Kennedy, and she was the first American neurosurgeon. But I came from Trinidad and Tobago, which is a small island in the Caribbean, not from a privileged background at all. And so I learned from a very young age that I needed to support my mum, and maybe taking a career path that was quite expensive, like neurosurgery, wasn't the one for me. So I did something that I loved, which was geography. And geography is a subject that kind of takes you and engulfs you about the world. And my mum, being such a huge influence in my career and my development, she said, you need to do something with IT, technology as well. And I said, okay, what if I combine geography and IT, and I do, a bit of something called GIS, which is Geographical Information Systems. And so I did that at university. And coming out of university, I realized that I wanted a bit more of that business corporate side of things, mainly for financial, but also from a growth standpoint. Now, I take 2 buckets from the diversity pool. I'm a Black woman, and so it's very challenging to get into roles because you're just faced with obstacles from the get-go. So, you know, people thinking you can't do it, or you don't have the ability, the capacity. And I really had to find myself in my early ages. And I worked for a company called Computer Center, which is a services organization selling computer products and services and software to companies. And Vodafone was my account. And so I spent 3 years on site with Vodafone, but in sales, so selling services to Vodafone. And I fell in love with the organization, mainly because I saw a different side of corporate life. I saw diversity. I saw diversity of thought. I saw diversity of people, diversity, the fact that Vodafone had a global reach. And so I started off in a technology role at Vodafone. And from there, I've kind of grown, developed, retrained, reskilled. I did a bit of procurement. And then I came back into an area of the business called partner markets. And that is an area where we service partners around the globe where we don't necessarily have a Vodafone footprint, and took some time out of the business to have a little one. So I'm a mother, a soon-to-be mother, again for the second time. So I'm just about to pop any day now. And then came back to the business to work with the CTO office. So Johan Weiber, who is our current Chief Technology Officer, in heading up the operational governance. So I always say technology chose me rather than I chose technology.
Great. That was so inspiring, among other things. Thank you so much for sharing your career at this point. I'm sorry for the connection. There seems to be some problems, but we're trying to fix them. Katerina, would you like to introduce yourself to us and your career?
Sure. After Adana, I mean, she's an inspiration to us, I think. Well, we share a lot in common, I think, already, because I also didn't choose technology, never imagined that I would end up here. I think we all come from a generation that when we started, we thought that we would do one career. And we were the first ones that, you know, popped up from different and made quite an itinerary already. And I think the next generation will completely bring this to a new era. So again, my background is in literature, languages, political science. So I started off with that. Then I was very eager to start having more connection with people and be more on the ground. So turned myself into leadership development, and particularly women's leadership development. So I did many years, particularly working in NGOs, UN Women, with leadership development programs and focusing on that. And pretty much as Adana said, I think I never saw myself as a corporate person. It came quite late in my life, and the technology as well, nothing that I would ever have thought of. In fact, my friends were all very surprised. They were like, are they sure they know your background? I mean, you're not that profile. But that's exactly what I loved about Vodafone. And I found the place that there were so many initiatives of bringing back women, reconnecting women who have taken time off, either for motherhood or for doing things for themselves, academic, which was my case. And then, so that's how I ended up here. I'm in HR, in people engagement now. I started off with learning and development. And it was an amazing spin, because suddenly I was in an organization that was upskilling quite fastly. What Adana described, I think, is the story of many people in the company who are continuously reskilling and upskilling. So it was very exciting to be facilitating this journey for our people. and to be able to do that for a very diverse group of people, completely different backgrounds, and for reassuring that they were giving the opportunities that they are aspiring to. So I'm always excited to hear stories like Adana's, that, you know, there is a different way of doing things, and we end up where we were meant to be, feeling at home. So right now I'm doing the people engagement here in Vodafone Greece, which entails many things of taking care of our people, from attraction to the whole journey of our employees. And I'm very happy to be working for this community, I would say.
Great. Okay, thank you all so much. I'm going to start our conversation with the upskilling factor that, Katerina, you mentioned in your introduction. So conventional wisdom says that women hit a glass ceiling. You know, we hear that all the time. As they advance, that prevents them from reaching senior leadership positions. But I recently learned that in reality, there's a biggest obstacle that women face, and it's the first step up to manager, or it's, as it's called in a 2019 Lean-In report, it's called the broken rank. So this broken rank results in more women getting stuck at the entry level and fewer women becoming managers. As a result, there are significantly fewer women to advance to higher levels. So based on your career thus far and your knowledge of the technology sector, how should companies fix this broken rank in order to get a gender parity across the entire pipeline? Or have you already addressed that in your companies? Who would like to start?
I can have a go at that question. I think it's a really deep question, because a woman has to go through so many transitions of life, and that's in a normal sense. You know, if you chose to have, I'll tell you from my story, I think taking time out of the business to become a mom is such a big responsibility for your personal life, but also you struggle with many things. You struggle with a lot of doubt in terms of, what does that mean for my career? Does that mean that I will have to take a step back, a demotion when I get back? And I think organizations have to ensure that they have programs and are set up in a way to allow a woman to have this time and not be worried about coming back into an organization. I think representation is important. You know, seeing women in senior leadership roles, you know, them sharing their story of how they got there, what are the challenges they faced, what are the obstacles, and how they were able to overcome. And I always say, tell your story, because it will have an impact on someone else. And last but not least, I think, is sponsorship. Having the backing of other women and all other men around you who actually activate and sponsor females to be able to shine is quite important. And I think for a woman, you know, I'm probably quite emotional now because I'm literally, you know, on the maternity bed. But for a woman, it's really challenging for us to deal with everything at work and everything at home. And it's finding that right balance. And it's important to know that you are enough. You are enough, and to give as much as you can. But companies need to understand that they need to create that psychological safety for women.
Yeah, I love what you were sharing. My story is not dissimilar, and I think that for a lot of moms, it's not dissimilar. I became a mom pretty early in my career, and I only took a 3-week maternity leave for my first kid, so that I could come back, because I was fearful that I would lose my job, and more importantly, I couldn't afford it because we didn't have a program in place. And I think that companies have gotten a lot better, as Katerina pointed at, like, there's rooms to breastfeed now. I didn't have to stop so early. And, you know, there's a lot more, I think, opportunity, but the problems still exist, which is, how do you manage your whole person, right, at work? And certainly a big part of that I've been really thinking about leading up to this point, and I spent a lot of time mentoring others, but I never had a strong female mentor leader when I was kind of coming up in my career. And I think the more and more programs exist to enable us to become mentors of, females of tomorrow, even if it's not within your own company, is incredibly important. I've done some mentoring for Hire Black, which is a great organization. And I'm a part of a women's organization called Chief, and that does a lot to help create the relationships that I need to now have mentors as well. So I think that the kind of relationship building to have someone to talk to say, how do you bring your whole person to work, is really, really important, because if we don't do that, then we're teaching people within our organizations that they have to not be emotional, or they have to, work through the difficulty of like a child crying when you need to deal with those sort of things, because they're fearful that no one else within that call or in that meeting or whatever will understand. And so bringing your whole self to work as a leader, I think, is one of the huge ways that we can inspire and help create at least internal promotion paths. But that's not going to change the challenge that all of us fell into tech found us, or we fell into it. But, this generation, they have a career path and they move on to it. And so how do we inspire more women to go into the career of tech, I think is a big challenge that we need to continue to face.
Yes, totally agree. Liz-Claude, you have some to...
Yeah, very, very interesting points that you make there. I can't speak as a mom, but for example, what you said, Andana, about these role models in the organization, more than half of our senior leadership team are women, and we can see that in the last year really stimulates other women in the organization to step forward when there is internal hiring, but also speak up when they want to get promoted and have that conversation. I guess, and that's then more, related to me personally. I think there's also something in women that sometimes holds them back to go for these, internal positions. So I think we as women all need to be very mindful of that, and where we can also help others and stimulate them to really go for these positions as well. Because even if they don't get it, it's great practice. It helps them to, elevate their profile in the organization as well. So indeed, a lot of creating visibility, a lot of role modeling. And then when I look at it from the side of, talent attraction, it's really how can we get enough women in the pipeline so they also can get promoted. And for example, in the organization, and then I presume in your organizations as well, Katarina, Andana, and Kimberly, it's really have these focused sessions where we see okay, how can we go beyond that pool that we know that exists of tech people, and really see if we can find talent, outside of that. And then there's obviously a lot of things there as hiring for potential, which I think we will talk about a bit later as well.
Katarina?
If I might add, because I think I agree on all those points, we have to recognize that it's not intuitive. It's not just gonna happen because we announce a position or we make something public. This is I think the mistake many times companies make and expect that this is an equal opportunity. The difference between equality and equity, and how we make sure that this is approachable, reachable to all, and women will have the same opportunity. And I agree that many times it appears that we limit ourselves. It must be based on previous experience or other structural things coming out of education, that women will not just, raise their hand and go, I will go for that position. We've all read the statistics of, women, in order to apply for a job, they need to have 150% the qualifications needed, where men with 50% of what is needed, they will say, why not? I will give it a go. I have nothing to lose. So it's quite different. And we feel that weight many times, that especially we see it in women in technology, that many times women are on there first. the first woman doing this, the first woman doing that in that department. So breaking that barrier is a lot of weight and luggage on one person. And it feels to them as if the one mistake will be charged on all womanhood and not on Katerina as an individual person. So we need to take that into account as well. And visibility, as everyone said, is the most important thing. We need to highlight and have those role models, have those women share their stories, have them upright and talk and see for the younger women to follow. Otherwise, this pipeline will be the same in some years from now as well. So we need that to be more diverse. We need to be attracting from a younger age and to have those open opportunities. Maybe these discussions will be obsolete in some time soon. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Oh.
While she's loading, Katerina, I wanted to, like, something struck me that you said, which is, you know, that women look to make sure that they have 150% of the qualifications. And I think it's then incumbent upon all of us as hiring managers to make sure that when you post a job, the requirements that you're putting on your job are the true requirements. So it's not just about women like overreaching. It's also about companies understanding and reflecting on these stats to grow their diversity pool so that they proceed forward. I think that the same is like in things like women don't negotiate as well.
Yeah.
So make sure that the compensation offer that you provide is fair and equitable on the front, and you're not waiting for them to negotiate with you. Yeah.
And also the way we write, speaking about advertising for a job, like a role profile. I don't know how in Greek and English it might work differently, but many times the way we write a job profile using masculine terms is very exclusive of women. We don't even realize it. So it's many little things that you can do in not only in the way that you promote, but also in the way you are, because Adana's experience, I think, is the most important, how you highlight and you showcase women's career like that. So that people can feel, I can do that. If she did it, I can follow on those types.
And I think for us as organizations, very important as well, right? Because when we keep on looking for the right experience, then again, we keep on, looking for the same people, and there's this huge war on talent, and there's so much potential out there. So how can we look for traits like innovation and problem solving and persistence, and really give that, the benefit for the people that we hire, and then build an earlier pipeline, which hopefully can then become our role models for the future. Welcome back, Naya.
Welcome back, Naya.
So sorry.
I think it's important.
What I was going to say.
Go ahead, Naya.
Okay, so what I was going to say was that your points were perfectly valid, and I can't empathize with them more because I am myself a working mom. I have a 4-year-old, and I remember that the first time I had to leave him to go back to work because I needed to work, and it wasn't just for. It was obligatory. I just needed to go back to my job. I love my job, and I had to leave him, and the pressure and the guilt was immense. And at my then working environment, there was almost no support at all.
Have we lost her?
I think so. I just wanted to raise one point. I think it's really important that we change the narrative from very young, that you can achieve and you can do anything. That belief is in yourself, is instilled from a very young age. And I do a lot of work. I just became an executive director for an academy trust, so looking after 60 schools across the UK. And one of the things that we're seeing is that little girls won't step up and say that they'll do things. And it's changing that narrative, and it's ensuring that we teach our girls that they can achieve anything from a very young age, which is quite important as well. And stepping up into things like coding for girls, we need to have programs that are open to inspire the younger generation. So ensuring that, I mean, at Vodafone, I know that we bring young graduates through the ranks and, you know, through coding experiences, but it's opening that corporate world and showing them that they could achieve these things as well.
Exactly. Can I do a follow-up question to you, Adana? Because, and with respect to your professional career, could you share with us the biggest obstacles that you faced as a woman of color in the technology sector? Because you know,
you're opening a can of worms.
I'm sure about that, because you know, I was reading a 2021 report that showed that just 3% of computer-related jobs are held by African-American women in the US, and with women of color making up for only like 18% of entry-level positions, as opposed to 30% of white women and 35% of white men, of course. So if you'd like to share something of your, you know.
I think for me especially, it was learning to realize that I'm enough. It took me a long time to be my whole self. And you see, I wear my natural hair now. Before, I felt like I needed to conform. I felt like I needed to dull down myself and it's because I was faced with microaggressions from such a young age. You know, I started off in my first role and I had someone tell me, you know, you don't come across neat enough, or, you know, you look more professional with your hair straight. And so that self-doubt was inside of me for a long time not until I had my first son, you know, and he has the biggest afro you could imagine for a 3-year-old. And I said, how am I going to teach this child to love himself? And every morning I wake up and I put a wig on with straight hair to go to work. I said, no. And so he taught me that I needed to change. I needed to adapt. I needed to love me and be confident in my capabilities and my talent and my ability to be able to show up. And I think the first obstacle is changing the narrative in the workplace. We have to make sure that everyone, regardless of race, gender, you know, sexual orientation, feel comfortable to be themselves. I am me. And regardless of what I look like or who I am, I have the ability and the credentials to do this job, and therefore you should feel accepted. And I know another thing is being confident in your uniqueness. I think that took me a little while to really grasp as a Black female and as an advocate for diversity and inclusion, and finding my voice and being able to speak up and show up and challenge the narrative when I see that it's not wrong and have the confidence to challenge. I didn't have that in my early career life, but now I do. And now I can work with the Vodafone D&I team to pull strategies together and to say, guys, we need to do more. We need to be more intentional, as Katerina said, and to be bold enough to challenge some of the things that happen that shouldn't happen.
Exactly. I don't know if any one of you would like to add something to Adana's words. No? Okay, so I'm taking it from this, and I would like to talk about the unconscious bias that is one of the biggest threats to diversity in the workplace. And I think the worst of them is the assessing for culture fit, you know, where candidates are judged whether they'll get along with the team and share similar interests. And since tech is still a male-dominated sector, I think we all know that's more than likely that they'll unconsciously view other men as having a better culture fit for the company rather than women. So, in your opinion, how are your companies dealing with this problem? Or is there a necessity for a wider appliance of unconscious bias training programs in the sector in order to eliminate these threats? Katarina, would you like to start?
Sure. Unconscious bias is my passion. Training, training, and more training. And when you think you've trained them all, continue to train. I think culture is, this is trying to change a culture that is embedded. It's starting from family, society, school, all the way up to. So we cannot hide that our companies are, a small reflection of society. Adana spoke of the microaggressions she has faced throughout her life. And we can say, yes, in a civilized working environment, you will not have a direct offense at you, but it's those small things that make all the difference. And this is the kind of training that takes a long time to be built into the people in order to actually change mentality. And as you said, because you're trying to change a male-dominated sector, it's hard for the privileged to see that to recognize your own privilege. And we've all been somewhere that we suddenly realize that I have some power. Normally, maybe I'm the underdog, I'm the woman in men's room. But when you realize that you have that, use it. As Adana said, use it, speak up, have that power. Every time, every little detail, do not let it drop. Not when it's addressed to you, when it's someone else in the room, every little detail that you see. So it's a slow change. It's happening. We're examples that it's happening. Adana, most of all, is an example that it's happening, because I'm sure the double layer there is immense. I cannot even imagine. So it's not something that is going to happen overnight. And it's not something that you can never, as a company, feel that, oh, I've done it. I've completed this program. Now I'm good. Let's move on to the next one. No, this is a continuous journey that we need to be on and never cease. Because the new generation, as they come in, I'm always amazed how I see younger colleagues coming in, and things that I had to challenge for them are so natural. And they go, why are we even discussing this? And I'm like, yes, why are we even discussing this? So still, we need to fight every fight, I think, and do not let any subtle comment pass away. These are built into, and you know what's happening behind closed door and those discussions. We need to have that transparent culture cultivated. And with unconscious bias, it's a fight that we all fight every day. I'm not above or beyond that. Every single day I'm like, yeah, I use that. And I think one interesting thing is the experience we're all living these last couple of years. And even today, we're having this beautiful discussion online. Some years ago, we would probably have to be flown in somewhere and have this live, etc. And it's so much more inclusive, not only for us, because someone who's about to pop up is joining the conversation. I don't think this would be possible. Now we're in our living rooms, in our houses, but also for those who are watching. It's so easy. Young women, young men, just clicking in and watching something, taking all that knowledge, understanding that somewhere else things are not done this way. It's not only in Greece that, the working environment's like that. I can see now how people work in other places around the world, how different standards have been met there. So I think we're very optimistic, but this never, ever stops. I think that's the message. If I have to say one thing, is that this always continues.
This is certainly one of your passions, Katerina. I can see that. I think with this one, it's the same, if you're in learning and development, knowing is not doing. And I think often there is indeed what we miss. Yes, you might be able to recognize your bias, but then how do you support indeed? How do you build that allyship? And I think there is a lot to do. Like, how can you really help people from understanding what they are, creating that awareness to really support, women, but, anybody who needs it to create an inclusive environment. And that's why I think, yes, we need to repeat everywhere, and how we can, that this is incredibly important. But also just the thought that how diversity can really help a tech company to be more innovative and to be more financially successful, I think is a great message as well, that we can reiterate. So lots of work to do there indeed.
Yeah, it's interesting because my perspective comes as like a recipient of all of the great work that you guys are doing at your companies, or you ladies are doing at your companies. This is the first company I've worked at that requires employees to take like unconscious bias training, which is amazing. I remember walking in and was like, wow, this is awesome. But like this notion of cultural fit that often happens, what our company does that I love that other companies I've been at haven't done is we stay away from anyone being able to evaluate that. Instead, we come up with one of our cultural values. Like we say what we mean and we do what we say is one of ours. And as a result, instead of us just evaluating that openly, we give all of the interviewers prompting questions. So one of them would be, tell me sometime that one of your past teammates misunderstood you. What was the impact of that misunderstanding? So you can get to the heart of like, are you actually saying what you mean? And how did you learn from this? And so I think that like the more companies focus on this, but also give tools to people on the receiving end, those that are the hiring managers, it will go a long way for at least making sure that that's not impacting your pipeline and your hiring decisions. But sorry, like a ton more needs to be done still within the company for how you do things like mentor employees and give feedback and training, etc.
Great. So, Grace Hopper, the computer scientist and one of the biggest technology pioneers, once said that the most dangerous phrase in the language is, we've always done it this way. That's how we do it. It always worked. It will work forever. So that wasn't just a comment on how using outdated knowledge or technology is harmful to building a product. It's also how denying new ideas, especially those from women, will ultimately do more harm than good. So I read that the current trend of hiring based on current competencies and prior experience has been proven to hurt women in the workplace. And because women are currently overlooked for entry-level positions, they can't gain applicable experience as quickly as others. So this immediately puts them at a disadvantage in the hiring process. They aren't able to, gain the knowledge and network as much as they need. So do you have any examples from your companies as how to treat this matter, how to fix this, how you approach it? Maybe Kimberly or Lizelot would like to comment on that if you have something to.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, I think a lot of the things that Adana shared is really important. I used to work in higher education, so ed tech, and I'm incredibly passionate about some of the challenges that occur in educating individuals. And one of the ways that education has started to resolve this is not require SAT and ACT and certainly like some of those common practice scores and determining who should be hired. And so as a hiring manager, a thing that I think a ton about is a tech degree really necessary? I don't have a tech degree, right? None of you have a tech degree. Is it really necessary for the role that I'm hiring for? And I think that is a big way that hiring managers need to be challenged for all of the requirements that they ultimately put for entry-level positions. Because higher-level positions, I get it, maybe sometimes that's required, but for entry-level positions, less so.
I think indeed in interview process, it's also important that, the people they meet from the company, that they are diverse as well. So that's especially something we look at when we put together an interview panel, but also at the debrief, having somebody who is neutral there, who can really moderate the discussion and also remind the hiring managers and the people that were part of the interview process not to step into some of these bias. I think some of the things that we touched upon, Naya, when you were trying to log in again, are here as well, right? Like, how can we indeed have more neutral language in the ads that we use? What are really requirements, which is probably more competencies? What are things that are desirable, which can be indeed some kind of degree? And then something what we really have looked at this year was to make our process as standardized as possible and also neutral to ensure that we can decrease bias. Which is important because we are, in two different, and I think for Vodafone, obviously you're across the whole world, but this is important when you attract people globally, that these processes are, as consistent as possible to reduce potential bias.
So Naya, I think we're running out of time, so I think we better wrap up. And I will show you my little bump. You see?
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and on that note, I just want to thank you guys for the conversation. Thank you for having me today. And if I were to say 3 things that I could leave this community with is show up, share your story, don't forget to fail, and love what you do.
This is the perfect
Thanks, Adana. Keep us posted and all the best. And thank you so much for being here. Super.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.